Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is Nefertiti, history's most mysterious queen. You get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Nefertiti, history's most mysterious queen. A queen who seemed to appear from the desert. Good evening. Tonight, as the world around you gradually becomes quieter, we are going to travel back more than 3,000 years to a land where the Nile River carried life through an endless sea of golden sand. Imagine the warm breeze moving gently across the desert, while distant birds circle above fields that have been nourished by the same river for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians believed that every sunrise was a miracle. Every morning, the sun god began another journey across the sky, bringing warmth, hope, and order to the world. Every evening, the same sun disappeared beneath the western horizon, beginning a mysterious voyage through darkness before returning again at dawn. To the people of Egypt, nothing happened by accident. Every flood of the Nile, every harvest, every child born into a family, and every successful reign of a king was connected to the delicate balance they called Ma'at, the harmony that held together the universe itself. It was a civilization unlike any other. Massive temples stretched towards the sky. Great stone statues guarded sacred pathways. Priests carefully recorded ceremonies that had remained almost unchanged for centuries. Artisans carved delicate images into limestone. Farmers rose before sunrise to tend fields that had fed generations. Boatmen drifted quietly along the Nile, carrying grain, papyrus, wine, and stories from one city to another. Life followed rhythms that felt almost eternal. Yet hidden within this seemingly timeless civilization lies one of history's greatest mysteries. Her name was Nefertiti. Even today, thousands of years later, archaeologists continue searching for answers about her life. Who exactly was she? Where did she come from? Did she truly become Pharaoh herself? And perhaps the greatest question of all, what happened to her? Unlike many rulers whose stories were carefully preserved, Nefertiti seems to appear almost suddenly in the historical record, as though she had stepped quietly out of the desert itself. Before her marriage, almost nothing can be said with complete certainty. No document clearly records her childhood. No royal inscription confidently identifies her parents. No surviving account tells us where she spent her earliest years. Instead, historians have spent generations carefully assembling scattered clues, each one offering only a small glimpse into a much larger picture. Some believe she was born into an influential Egyptian family connected to the royal court. Others have suggested she may have been linked to foreign nobility, arriving from neighboring kingdoms where diplomacy often depended upon marriage. Neither possibility has been proven beyond doubt. And so the mystery begins long before she ever wore a royal crown. Picture yourself standing beside the Nile during those distant centuries. The morning air is still cool before the heat of the day begins. Palm trees sway gently. Fishermen prepare their small boats. Children laugh quietly as they help carry baskets of grain. In the distance rises a magnificent palace where members of the royal family begin another carefully organized day. Somewhere within that world, a young woman is growing into adulthood. No one around her can possibly know that thousands of years later, millions of people will still speak her name. Her future remains hidden. History has not yet begun to watch her. Ancient Egypt itself had already existed for well over 1,000 years by the time Nefertiti entered its story. Dynasties had risen and disappeared. Powerful kings had built monuments so enormous that even today they continue to inspire wonder. Generations believed these monuments would last forever. In many ways they were right. Yet stone preserves only part of history. Lives, conversations, emotions, hopes, fears, and dreams often vanish without leaving a trace. That is why historians treasure even the smallest discovery. A broken piece of pottery, a faded inscription, a damaged statue. Each fragment becomes another tiny voice speaking softly across more than 30 centuries. Nefertiti's story survives in exactly this way. Not as one complete book, not as one perfectly preserved biography, but as countless small pieces waiting patiently to be assembled. Some pieces fit comfortably together, others refuse to match, and a few continue to puzzle even the world's leading Egyptologists. Perhaps that uncertainty explains why her story feels so alive. Every generation returns to the same questions. Every new excavation raises fresh possibilities. Every discovery invites another interpretation. Rather than becoming clearer with time, Nefertiti often becomes even more fascinating. One of the first things many people notice is her name. Nefertiti is commonly translated as "the beautiful woman has come." It is a name filled with elegance. Yet even this beautiful phrase creates another mystery. Where exactly had this beautiful woman come from? Was the name simply poetic? Or did it quietly hint at origins beyond the Egyptian royal family? Ancient names often carried meanings that modern readers cannot fully recover. Language changes, customs evolve. Symbolism shifts across centuries. The Egyptians loved names that reflected hope, beauty, divine protection, or royal destiny. Perhaps Nefertiti's name belonged naturally within that tradition? Or perhaps it carried a message now lost forever. As the years passed, the young woman eventually entered the royal household through marriage. Her husband was Amenhotep IV. At first, few could have predicted how dramatically his reign would transform Egypt. He inherited one of the richest kingdoms in the ancient world. Temples flourished. Priests possessed enormous influence. Traditional gods had guided Egyptian religion for centuries. Everything appeared stable. Everything appeared secure. Yet beneath the surface, change was already beginning. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. History often changes this way, not always with battles, not always with revolutions. Sometimes change begins inside the thoughts of a single person. Sometimes those thoughts reshape an entire civilization. And sometimes one remarkable partnership alters history forever. Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti would soon become exactly such a partnership. Together, they would challenge traditions older than many kingdoms. Together, they would build an entirely new capital city. Together, they would create one of the most unusual periods in all Egyptian history. Yet none of that has happened quite yet. For now, evening slowly settles across the Nile. The warm colors of sunset reflect gently upon calm waters. Temple bells sound softly in the distance. Families gather for simple meals. The desert begins releasing the heat it gathered throughout the day. Stars gradually appear above the silent pyramids that have already watched countless generations come and go. Somewhere beyond those stars, according to Egyptian belief, the gods continue their eternal journeys. And somewhere within the royal palace, the future Queen Nefertiti prepares to step into history. She cannot know that artists will one day create one of the most famous sculptures ever discovered. She cannot know that entire museums will celebrate her beauty. She cannot know that archaeologists, historians, and curious travelers from every corner of the world will spend centuries searching for her final resting place. She simply lives one ordinary day before history transforms everything. Sometimes the greatest mysteries begin in the quietest moments. And perhaps that is why Nefertiti continues to captivate us today. Not because every question has been answered, but because so many gentle mysteries still remain waiting patiently beneath Egypt's ancient sands. How Nefertiti and Amenhotep IV began Egypt's most extraordinary partnership. The first light of morning spread gently across the eastern horizon, turning the waters of the Nile into ribbons of gold. The river moved as it always had, calm and patient, carrying life through the heart of Egypt. Farmers were already walking toward their fields. Fishermen untied their small boats from wooden posts along the riverbank. Somewhere in the distance, the deep sound of temple drums welcomed another day. For the ordinary people of Egypt, this morning seemed no different from countless others. Yet within the walls of the royal palace, events were quietly unfolding that would eventually reshape one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. Long before historians would call them one of history's most remarkable royal couples, Nefertiti and the young prince Amenhotep lived in a world carefully guided by tradition. Every movement inside the palace followed established customs. Servants knew exactly where to stand. Officials understood every ceremony. Priests performed rituals that had remained unchanged for generations. Even the smallest details reflected centuries of royal tradition. Imagine yourself walking silently through one of those palace corridors. Smooth limestone walls catch the soft morning sunlight. Colorful paintings show kings making offerings to the gods. The air carries the faint fragrance of lotus flowers and sweet incense drifting from nearby shrines. Everything feels peaceful. Everything feels carefully ordered. It is within this quiet world that the paths of two young people begin to meet. Who exactly was Nefertiti before becoming queen? The truth remains uncertain. Unlike many royal children whose births were proudly recorded, Nefertiti enters history almost without introduction. Some Egyptologists believe she may have been the daughter of Ai, a powerful official who would later become Pharaoh himself. Others suggest she belonged to another respected noble family close to the royal court. A few scholars have proposed more distant foreign origins, though the evidence remains limited. This uncertainty has become one of the reasons her story continues to fascinate people today. It reminds us that history is not always complete. Sometimes we are fortunate enough to hear only whispers from the past. As the years passed, the young prince Amenhotep prepared for responsibilities unlike those of any ordinary man. He had been born into immense privilege, but also into enormous expectation. One day he would become Pharaoh, regarded not simply as a king, but as the living representative of divine order upon earth. From childhood, he learned diplomacy, religion, military leadership, and the countless ceremonies expected of an Egyptian ruler. Yet even during his younger years, there may already have been signs that his mind moved differently from those before him. Later history would reveal a ruler willing to challenge traditions that had endured for centuries. Perhaps those thoughts had already begun quietly forming. Perhaps no one around him yet realized how deeply they would influence Egypt. Somewhere during these early years, his life became connected with Nefertiti's. Their marriage was more than a personal relationship. Royal marriages rarely depended upon romance alone. They strengthened political alliances. They secured dynasties. They reassured the kingdom that the royal family would continue. Yet, as historians examine surviving artwork from later years, something unusual begins to appear. Unlike many earlier Egyptian rulers, Amenhotep and Nefertiti were often shown together in remarkably intimate scenes. They are seen holding hands, standing close together, looking toward one another, playing with their daughters beneath the warm rays of the Aten. These images feel surprisingly human. Instead of presenting only distant royal perfection, they suggest affection, companionship, and shared purpose. Of course, ancient art always carried symbolism. Artists painted not simply what happened, but what rulers wished to communicate. Even so, the closeness shown between Amenhotep and Nefertiti remains distinctive within Egyptian royal art. Picture yourself attending the royal wedding. The palace is alive with quiet celebration. Musicians play gentle melodies on harps and flutes. Fresh flowers decorate shaded courtyards. Priests prepare sacred blessings. Officials from every corner of Egypt gather beneath brightly colored banners. Golden jewelry reflects the sunlight. Fine linen garments move softly in the warm breeze. The ceremony itself is solemn. Prayers rise towards the ancient gods who have protected Egypt for countless generations. Offerings are placed before sacred statues. Incense curls upward into the still air. No one present can imagine that within only a few years, many of these very traditions will face extraordinary change. For now, everything appears stable. Everything seems eternal. The young couple begin their married life, surrounded by one of the richest civilizations the ancient world has ever known. The temples of Amun at Thebes possess enormous wealth. Priests oversee vast estates. Merchants travel across deserts and seas, bringing cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia, precious stones from distant lands, and exotic goods from regions few Egyptians will ever see. The kingdom prospers, granaries remain full. The Nile continues its dependable floods. Peace seems possible. Yet beneath that peaceful surface, ideas are beginning to shift. Sometimes history changes slowly enough that almost nobody notices. One conversation, one new belief, one quiet question asked in private. Years later, those moments may appear to have changed everything. Perhaps something similar was happening inside the royal household. As husband and wife spent more time together, they likely discussed religion, leadership, justice, and the future of Egypt. No record preserves those conversations. No scribe sat nearby writing every word. Only silence remains. But their later actions suggest remarkable unity. Again and again, Nefertiti appears beside Amenhotep, not simply as a ceremonial queen, but as an active participant in public life. She accompanies him during religious ceremonies. She appears prominently in temple reliefs. Sometimes her position seems almost equal to his. For ancient Egypt, this was extraordinary. Queens had certainly held influence before. Some had ruled as regents. A few had even become pharaohs. But Nefertiti's public visibility reached unusual heights. As artists carefully carved her image almost as frequently as the king himself. Her distinctive, tall blue crown became one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncovered her famous limestone bust, people around the world were struck not only by its beauty, but by its extraordinary craftsmanship. The graceful neck, the calm expression, the slightly lifted chin, the quiet confidence in her gaze. Even today, that sculpture seems almost alive. It invites us to imagine the real woman behind the stone. Was she thoughtful, gentle, determined? Perhaps all three. As evening slowly approaches our story once more, the palace grows quieter. The day's ceremonies have ended. The desert begins cooling beneath a sky filled with stars. The Nile continues its endless journey toward the sea, carrying with it reflections of moonlight that shimmer across its gentle current. Inside the royal residence, a young king and queen begin planning a future that neither they nor their people fully understand. Soon they will question beliefs accepted for centuries. Soon they will build an entirely new royal city from empty desert. Soon Egypt will witness one of the most astonishing religious transformations in its long history. For now, however, those remarkable events still lie just beyond tomorrow. The kingdom sleeps peacefully. The temples remain full. The old gods continue receiving prayers. And Nefertiti, whose name will echo across more than 3,000 years, quietly stands beside the man who is about to change Egypt forever. How Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti began Egypt's greatest religious revolution. The morning arrived quietly over the Nile. As the first rays of sunlight reached the river, A gentle mist floated above the water before slowly disappearing into the warmth of the day. Birds crossed the brightening sky, and the familiar rhythm of Egyptian life began once more. Farmers stepped into the fields, craftsmen opened their workshops, and priests prepared the first offerings inside magnificent temples whose walls had witnessed centuries of devotion. Everything appeared exactly as it had the day before. And yet sometimes the greatest changes begin so gently that no one notices them at first. Imagine yourself standing outside one of Egypt's great temples. Massive stone columns rise high above your head. The scent of incense drifts softly through the air. Priests dressed in spotless white linen move silently between sacred chambers, carefully performing rituals that their fathers and grandfathers had performed before them. Every word, every movement, every offering, everything follows traditions that reach back for more than 1,000 years. To the Egyptian people, the gods were everywhere. Amun watched over kings. Osiris ruled the peaceful kingdom of the dead. Isis protected mothers and children. Horus represented royal power. Thoth guarded wisdom and writing. Every city honored its own sacred traditions. Every temple held its own ceremonies. Religion was woven into every part of daily life. For generations, almost no one imagined Egypt without this rich world of many gods. Then something unexpected began to happen. The young pharaoh, Amenhotep IV, seemed increasingly drawn toward one particular divine power, the Aten. Unlike many Egyptian gods, Aten was not represented as a human figure or an animal. Instead, Aten was symbolized by the visible disk of the sun itself, whose rays stretched downward like gentle hands reaching towards the earth. Perhaps every sunrise inspired the young king. Perhaps he found something deeply comforting in the warmth that touched every person equally, whether rich or poor. No historian can know exactly what filled his heart. The ancient records tell us what he did. They do not always tell us why. As the months passed, his devotion became stronger. Temples honoring Aten received increasing attention. Royal ceremonies slowly changed. Words spoken during religious rituals began to sound different. At first, these changes may have seemed small. Most people likely assumed that the pharaoh simply favored one god more than others. That had happened before. Egyptian kings often showed special devotion to particular deities, but this time the story would not end there. Beside him stood Nefertiti. Throughout these remarkable years, she appears again and again in temple carvings dedicated to Aten. She is not hidden behind the king. She stands beside him. Sometimes she performs offerings herself. Sometimes she appears beneath the sun's rays almost as prominently as the pharaoh. This was extraordinary. Ancient artists carefully carved the rays of Aten, ending in tiny human hands. Some gently held the symbol of life, the Ankh, towards the royal family. It was a beautiful image. The sun itself seemed to reach down with quiet kindness. Imagine standing in one of these newly decorated temples. Unlike older sanctuaries filled with dark inner chambers, many Aten temples welcomed open sunlight. there was no need to hide from the sun. The sunlight itself became part of worship. Warm golden light filled the courtyards. Gentle breezes moved between elegant columns. Instead of darkness, there was openness. Instead of mystery hidden deep within enclosed rooms, there was the brightness of the sky above. It must have felt very different from anything Egyptians had experienced before. Some welcomed the change. Others may have watched with growing uncertainty. For centuries, powerful priesthoods had guided Egypt's religious life. Among the strongest was the priesthood of Amun. Their temples owned vast lands. They employed thousands of workers. Their influence reached almost every corner of the kingdom. As Amenhotep's attention shifted toward Aten, that balance of power slowly began to change. No great battle announced the beginning of this transformation. No single dramatic speech survives. Instead, inscriptions reveal gradual decisions. New monuments, new prayers, new artistic styles. Little by little, the old order weakened. History often changes like the slow turning of a river. At first, its movement is almost impossible to notice. Only years later does everyone realize the landscape has become completely different. Nefertiti seems to have shared her husband's vision. Whether she encouraged these changes from the beginning or gradually embraced them remains uncertain. The evidence cannot answer every question, but what survives leaves little doubt that she became one of the most visible supporters of the new religious movement. Artists carved her image with remarkable care. She wore elegant crowns unlike those of earlier queens. Her graceful posture conveyed dignity rather than distance. She appeared not only as a royal wife, but almost as a sacred partner in the new spiritual order. The royal family itself also appeared differently in art. Instead of rigid ceremonial poses, artists began creating surprisingly natural scenes. The king kisses one of his daughters. Nefertiti holds a child in her arms. The royal family sits together beneath Aten's warm rays. There is movement. There is affection. There is life. These images feel astonishingly modern, despite being more than 3,000 years old. They remind us that behind every crown lived real people. Parents smiled. Children laughed. Families shared quiet moments together. The ancient stone still preserves those peaceful memories. As evening slowly approaches once more, the sunlight softens across Egypt. The temples of the old gods continue their rituals. The new temples of Aten glow beneath the fading sky. Two different visions of the world now exist side by side. Most people cannot yet know which future awaits them. The Nile flows onward without choosing between old and new. Its waters remain unchanged. The stars appear exactly as they always have. Yet within the royal palace, a decision has already begun to take shape. It is a decision so bold that it will soon transform not only religion, but the very landscape of Egypt itself. The pharaoh will abandon the ancient centers of power. A completely new city will rise from empty desert, and beside him, Nefertiti will stand at the heart of that extraordinary experiment. For a brief moment in history, it will seem as though an entirely new Egypt is being born beneath the rising sun. Why Nefertiti and Akhenaten left everything behind to build, Amarna morning arrived slowly across the eastern desert. The first light spread over endless stretches of pale sand, gently touching the rocky cliffs that bordered the Nile. The air was cool, carrying only the quiet whispers of a breeze that had traveled across empty valleys long before reaching the river. For a few peaceful moments, the world seemed perfectly still. Imagine standing there in the silence. There are no towering temples, no busy marketplaces, no crowded streets, only open desert stretching towards the horizon. It is difficult to imagine that this lonely place will soon become the center of an empire. Yet this was exactly what Akhenaten intended. The pharaoh, once known as Amenhotep IV, had already begun changing Egypt's religion. But now he was preparing to do something even more astonishing. He would leave behind the ancient capital. He would leave behind the powerful temples of Amun. He would leave behind generations of tradition. Instead, he would build an entirely new city where no city had ever stood before. A place dedicated not to the old gods, but to Aten alone. It was an extraordinary decision. Throughout history, rulers have often rebuilt palaces or expanded existing capitals. Very few have abandoned the political and religious heart of their kingdom to begin again from nothing. Yet Akhenaten believed that this untouched stretch of desert had been chosen by Aten himself. Boundary stelae, large carved monuments placed around the surrounding cliffs, later recorded the king's declaration that this land belonged to the sun god and had never belonged to any other deity. Whether this belief came from deep personal faith or careful political planning remains a question historians continue to discuss. Perhaps it was both. Beside him stood Nefertiti. As always, she appeared not as a distant observer, but as an active partner in this remarkable journey. Imagine watching the royal procession as it travels north along the Nile. Elegant boats glide over calm waters. Bright sails catch the morning wind. Soldiers, officials, artists, architects, and craftsmen accompany the royal family. The journey is peaceful. The river has carried kings before, but never toward a dream quite like this one. Soon the quiet desert begins to change. Surveyors measure the land. Stonecutters mark the cliffs. Workers unload tools from boats. Architects sketch wide roads and spacious courtyards. The silence slowly gives way to the gentle sounds of construction. Hammer strikes echo against limestone. Wooden sledges carry enormous blocks. Voices call softly across the growing settlement. Little by little, a city begins to emerge. The Egyptians called it Akhetaten, the horizon of Aten. Today, we know it as Amarna. Unlike older Egyptian cities, whose temples often hid sacred spaces deep inside dark halls, Akhetaten was designed to embrace sunlight. Broad, open courtyards welcomed the rays of the morning sun. Altars stood beneath the open sky. The city itself reflected the new religious vision. Light was no longer something that entered a temple. Light became the temple. Imagine walking through those streets during the city's earliest days. Fresh white limestone gleams beneath the bright Egyptian sun. New homes line carefully planned avenues. Gardens filled with flowering plants soften the edges of elegant buildings. Children run between shaded courtyards. Merchants arrange goods brought from every corner of the empire. Artists paint colorful scenes unlike anything Egypt had seen before. Everything feels new. Everything feels hopeful. The city grows with astonishing speed. Thousands of workers labor day after day. Some shape stone, others prepare mud bricks. Carpenters build roofs from imported timber. Potters create jars for grain, oil, and wine. Bakers fill ovens with fresh bread before sunrise. Life begins to flow naturally through streets that only months earlier had been empty desert. At the center stands the royal palace. Here Akhenaten and Nefertiti oversee both government and religious life. Many surviving carvings show them together beneath the rays of Aten, accompanied by their daughters. Unlike earlier royal art, these scenes reveal small moments of family life. One daughter reaches toward her mother. Another sits comfortably beside her father. The king gently kisses one of his children. These intimate images remain among the most touching works ever produced in ancient Egypt. They remind us that history is not made only through great political decisions. It is also shaped by ordinary human relationships. Parents watching children grow, families sharing quiet evenings, laughter echoing through palace gardens. Perhaps Nefertiti herself found comfort in these peaceful moments. Although later generations remembered her beauty, those who lived beside her likely admired many other qualities as well: confidence, wisdom, grace, calm determination. Again and again, official reliefs present her almost as an equal partner in royal ceremonies. She wears the famous tall blue crown that would one day become known throughout the world. She offers gifts to Aten. She receives blessings beneath the outstretched rays of the sun. Sometimes she even appears striking enemies, a role traditionally reserved for pharaohs. Such images suggest that her public authority had reached extraordinary heights. Whether she formally ruled beside Akhenaten or simply represented royal unity remains uncertain. But there is little doubt that she occupied an exceptional position within Egyptian history. As the city flourished, not everyone welcomed the changes. Far away in Thebes, the ancient temples of Amun had lost much of their influence. Priests who had guided Egypt for generations now watched the rise of a completely different religious system. Many officials likely accepted the new order publicly while privately wondering how long it could last. Change often brings uncertainty. The ordinary people of Egypt probably felt this uncertainty most deeply. A farmer still needed to harvest grain. A fisherman still depended upon the Nile. A mother still prayed for the health of her children. Whether those prayers reached Amun, Isis, or Aten may have mattered less than simply finding hope in uncertain times. History sometimes focuses on kings and queens, but countless unnamed people quietly carried the weight of every great transformation. As the years passed, Akhetaten became one of the most remarkable cities in the ancient world. Foreign ambassadors arrived bearing gifts. Letters traveled between Egypt and neighboring kingdoms. Artists developed an entirely new style. Faces appeared more natural. Bodies were shown with unusual realism. The royal family became the heart of nearly every artistic creation. Even today, archaeologists continue uncovering homes, workshops, temples, and written records beneath the desert sands of Amarna. Each discovery adds another small piece to the story. Each fragment reminds us that this city, though short-lived, once pulsed with life. Imagine the sun setting over Akhenaten. Its final golden rays wash across white buildings, temple courtyards, and the quiet waters of the Nile beyond. Workers return home after another day. Children's laughter gradually fades into evening silence. Cooking fires begin to glow. The desert releases the warmth that gathered throughout the day. Above, countless stars slowly appear, just as they had long before the city existed. For a brief moment, everything feels peaceful, yet beneath that peaceful surface, time continues its quiet work. No city lasts forever. No kingdom remains unchanged. The dream of Akhenaten, bright as the morning sun, will eventually begin to fade. And before long, another mystery will emerge. Nefertiti herself, the queen whose face became immortal, will slowly disappear from the historical record. Where did she go? Why did the inscriptions suddenly grow silent? The answers remain hidden beneath layers of history, waiting patiently to be uncovered. The strange disappearance of Nefertiti from history. The evening breeze moved gently across the rooftops of Akhenaten. As the last light of the sun slipped behind the western cliffs, the great city slowly became quieter. The busy sounds of craftsmen faded. The laughter of children drifted away into the distance. Oil lamps began to glow inside homes, while priests offered their final prayers beneath the open sky. For a few peaceful moments, everything appeared exactly as it had for years. The royal family still occupied the magnificent palace. The temples of Aten still welcomed the rising and setting sun. The city still stood as the living symbol of Akhenaten's extraordinary vision. Yet history has a quiet way of changing. Not always with battles, not always with great disasters. Sometimes it changes through silence. Sometimes the most important person simply stops appearing. Imagine yourself as one of the royal scribes working in Akhenaten. Every day, your task is to record ceremonies, official decrees, and important events within the kingdom. The names of the king and queen are written carefully. Every offering, every celebration, every religious festival, everything is preserved for future generations. Then, little by little, something unusual begins to happen. The name of Nefertiti appears less often. Months pass, perhaps years. Eventually, her presence almost disappears from the official record. No announcement explains why. No inscription calmly tells future historians what happened. The silence itself becomes the mystery. For modern archaeologists, this silence has become one of the greatest puzzles in Egyptian history. Did Nefertiti die unexpectedly? Did illness take her during one of Egypt's difficult years? Some scholars believe this is possible. Ancient Egypt, despite all its greatness, could not escape disease. Even within royal palaces, life remained fragile. A sudden epidemic, an unknown infection, a fever that no physician understood. Any of these could have changed history forever. Yet no royal tomb clearly tells us that Nefertiti died at this particular moment. No funeral inscription has been discovered beyond doubt. And so another possibility emerges. Perhaps she did not disappear at all. Perhaps she simply changed. Several Egyptologists have suggested that Nefertiti may have adopted a new royal name later in Akhenaten's reign. If this happened, historians searching only for Nefertiti would naturally believe she had vanished. Instead, she may have continued ruling under another identity. One of the names most often discussed is Nefertiti. Ancient inscriptions mention a ruler by this name during the final years of the Amarna period. But who exactly was this person? The evidence remains incomplete. Some scholars believe Nefertiti was Nefertiti herself. Others disagree. The surviving inscriptions are damaged. Many names have been deliberately erased. Time has not been kind to the evidence. Imagine walking through the abandoned halls of Akhenaten centuries later. Wind carries fine desert sand through empty doorways. Paint slowly fades from palace walls. Statues lose their faces beneath storms and passing generations. The voices that once filled these magnificent rooms have long since fallen silent. Only fragments remain. A broken carving, a damaged inscription, a cracked piece of pottery. Each discovery answers one question while creating another. Perhaps that is why Nefertiti's story continues to feel so alive, like it has never truly been completed. One particularly fascinating possibility is that Nefertiti ruled as pharaoh herself. This would not have been impossible. Egypt had already known remarkable female rulers. Earlier in history, Hatshepsut had successfully governed Egypt as pharaoh for many years. She wore royal regalia. She appeared in official monuments. She ruled one of Egypt's most prosperous periods. If Hatshepsut could do so, perhaps Nefertiti could as well. Some artistic evidence even shows Nefertiti performing actions normally reserved only for kings. She strikes Egypt's enemies. She leads sacred ceremonies. She stands alone beneath Aten's rays with remarkable authority. These images continue to encourage debate among historians. Were they symbolic, or were they preparing Egypt for a female pharaoh? Unfortunately, certainty remains just beyond our reach. Ancient Egypt often speaks clearly, but sometimes it whispers, and whispers leave room for imagination. As Akhenaten himself grew older, Egypt entered a period of increasing uncertainty. The empire that earlier pharaohs had carefully maintained began facing difficulties abroad. Some foreign territories became harder to control. Letters discovered at Amarna reveal neighboring rulers requesting military assistance that sometimes never arrived. Within Egypt itself, devotion to Aten continued. But many people likely remembered the old gods with quiet affection. Traditions that had lasted for centuries are not easily forgotten. The beautiful city of Akhenaten remained impressive. Its white temples still reflected brilliant sunlight. Its wide streets still welcomed merchants and officials. Yet beneath the surface, change was once again approaching. History rarely remains still for long. Imagine one final peaceful evening inside the royal palace. Nefertiti walks through a quiet courtyard filled with flowering plants. The warm air carries the fragrance of lotus blossoms. Somewhere nearby, musicians play soft melodies upon wooden harps. Her daughters have grown older now. The city she helped build has become a thriving capital. Yet perhaps even she senses that the future has become uncertain. Did she know that later generations would forget much of her story? Did she ever imagine that people living more than 3,000 years later would still search for her? Almost certainly not. Like every human being, she lived only within her own present. She could not see the centuries waiting ahead. As night settles gently over Akhenaten, the stars appear once again above the desert. The same stars watched the builders raise this extraordinary city. The same stars now shine over growing uncertainty. Soon Akhenaten's reign will come to an end. Soon Egypt will begin abandoning the city of the sun. Soon ancient traditions will quietly return. And somewhere within that changing world, the greatest mystery still remains unsolved. Where was Nefertiti laid to rest? Was her tomb hidden deliberately? Has it already been discovered without anyone realizing its true owner? Or does it still lie quietly beneath the sands of Egypt, waiting patiently for the day when history finally reveals one of its oldest secrets? For now, only silence answers. The desert keeps its memories well, and Nefertiti, the queen whose beauty became timeless, slowly fades into legend while leaving behind one of history's greatest unanswered questions: the extraordinary search for Nefertiti's final resting place. The desert is never truly silent. Even during the quietest hours before dawn, the wind continues its endless journey across the golden sands. Tiny grains drift slowly over ancient stones, covering one footprint while uncovering another. Somewhere in the distance, a lone bird crosses the pale morning sky, while the first rays of sunlight gently touch the rugged cliffs that have watched over Egypt for thousands of years. Imagine standing in that peaceful landscape. The air is cool. The world feels almost unchanged. Yet beneath your feet lies layer upon layer of history. Temples, homes, workshops, forgotten roads, and perhaps somewhere beneath the silent earth, a royal tomb that has escaped every search for more than 3,000 years. This is the mystery that has drawn archaeologists, historians, and dreamers from every corner of the world. Where is Nefertiti? For the ancient Egyptians, death was never considered an ending. It was a journey. Just as the sun disappeared each evening only to rise again the following morning, they believed the human soul continued its own voyage into eternity. Because of this belief, enormous care was taken in preparing for life after death. Royal tombs became houses for eternity. Walls were painted with sacred scenes. Treasures were carefully arranged. Jewelry, furniture, clothing, food, perfumes, and precious objects accompanied the deceased into the next world. Every detail reflected hope rather than fear. To modernize, these tombs appear magnificent. To the Egyptians, they were acts of love and faith. Imagine entering one of these ancient burial chambers. Your footsteps echo softly against smooth stone walls. Painted figures seem almost alive beneath the gentle glow of torchlight. Brilliant blues, deep reds, warm golds, and soft greens still shine despite the passing of countless centuries. Hieroglyphs cover the walls like quiet prayers, frozen in time. Everything has been prepared for a journey that never truly ends. If Nefertiti received such a burial, where did it take place? That question has challenged generations of scholars. One possibility seems simple. Perhaps she was buried in Akhenaten, the city she helped create. After all, Akhenaten had planned royal tombs within the cliffs surrounding the new capital. The royal tomb at Amarna still survives today, although it suffered heavy damage over the centuries. Within its corridors, archaeologists discovered evidence that members of the royal family had indeed been buried there. Fragments of carved reliefs show moments of grief. Broken sarcophagi tell stories of loss. Yet no clear evidence has ever confirmed that Nefertiti herself rested there permanently. If she was once buried in Amarna, her remains may later have been moved. That possibility opens another chapter of the mystery. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt changed rapidly. The worship of Aten slowly faded. The old gods returned. The great temples of Amun reopened. Officials who had once served the new religion adapted once again to ancient traditions. Akhenaten, once filled with hope and ambition, gradually emptied. Families departed, palaces fell silent. The city that had risen so quickly began disappearing back into the desert. Imagine watching this slow departure. One family packs its belongings onto a boat. Another loads furniture onto wooden carts. Children glance back toward homes where they had grown up. The streets become quieter each passing week. Windows stand empty. Gardens begin drying beneath the relentless Egyptian sun. Eventually, only the wind remains. If royal burials still existed there, perhaps they too were relocated. Ancient Egyptians deeply respected their rulers. Moving a royal mummy to protect it would not have been unthinkable. Many pharaohs were reburied during later centuries to protect them from tomb robbers. Could something similar have happened to Nefertiti? No one knows. One of the most fascinating modern theories suggests that Nefertiti may still rest somewhere inside the Valley of the Kings. This remarkable valley, hidden among the barren hills near ancient Thebes, became the burial place of many New Kingdom pharaohs. For centuries, explorers searched its rocky landscape. Some tombs were found quickly, others remained hidden until modern times. Even today, archaeologists continue making new discoveries there. Perhaps the most famous discovery of all came in 1922, when Howard Carter uncovered the nearly untouched tomb of Tutankhamun. The world watched with amazement. Golden treasures filled newspapers across the globe. Masks, chariots, jewelry, statues, and delicate furniture revealed extraordinary craftsmanship. It seemed almost impossible that so much beauty had survived. Yet even this remarkable discovery created new questions. Tutankhamun himself had strong connections to the Amarna royal family. His exact relationship to Akhenaten and Nefertiti continues to be studied. If the young king's tomb survived largely intact, could another royal burial remain hidden nearby? Some archaeologists believe it is possible. A few years ago, modern scanning technology revealed unusual patterns behind certain walls within Tutankhamun's tomb. Some researchers proposed that hidden chambers might exist beyond the painted surfaces. Could one of those chambers belong to Nefertiti? The idea captured imaginations around the world. For a moment, it seemed possible that history's greatest archaeological discovery might be only a few meters away. Further investigations followed. Radar surveys were conducted. Experts carefully examined the evidence. Some believed the hidden spaces were real. Others remained unconvinced. As often happens in archaeology, certainty proved difficult to achieve. The debate continues even today. The mystery remains beautifully unresolved. Imagine archaeologists working quietly beneath the desert sun. Small brushes remove grains of sand one by one. Every stone is examined. Every inscription photographed. Every fragment carefully recorded. There's no hurry. History rewards patience. Sometimes an entire season of excavation reveals only a few broken pieces of pottery. Sometimes a single doorway changes everything. That is the nature of archaeology. It is less about dramatic discoveries than about listening carefully to the quiet voices of the past. Perhaps somewhere beneath untouched sand lies a sealed doorway. Behind it may rest a chamber that no human eye has seen since ancient Egypt. The air inside would remain perfectly still after thousands of years. The painted walls might still glow with remarkable color. Objects placed there with love and care could still wait exactly where ancient hands left them. And perhaps, resting peacefully within that timeless silence, the mystery of Nefertiti would finally come to an end. Or perhaps the answer lies somewhere entirely different. History often surprises us. The greatest discoveries frequently appear where nobody expected them. As evening slowly returns to the Egyptian desert, long shadows stretch across the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. The wind grows cooler. The last sunlight gently fades behind the mountains. Silence settles once more over the landscape. Beneath those ancient hills, countless stories remain hidden. Some have already been found. Others continue waiting with remarkable patience. Among them, one question still whispers through the desert air. Where does the queen who captivated the ancient world truly rest? Perhaps tomorrow's archaeologists will find the answer. Perhaps another generation must continue the search. Until that day arrives, the sands of Egypt continue to guard one of history's most beautiful mysteries. How Nefertiti's bust became the world's most famous ancient portrait. The desert has a remarkable memory. It does not remember through words or songs, but through silence. Year after year, century after century, the wind patiently carries sand across forgotten cities. Walls collapse, roofs disappear, gardens become dust. Entire civilizations seem to fade beneath the endless Egyptian sun. Yet every now and then, the desert quietly gives something back. Imagine the early morning light spreading across the abandoned ruins of Amarna. The city no longer echoes with the voices of priests or the footsteps of royal servants. The grand avenues that once welcomed ambassadors from distant kingdoms are empty. The magnificent palace has become a collection of broken walls. Wild grasses grow where elegant gardens once flourished. To a passing traveler, it might seem that nothing remains. But beneath the sand, history has been waiting, patiently, quietly, for more than 3,000 years. In the winter of 1912, a team of German archaeologists arrived at Amarna, led by Ludwig Borchardt. Like many archaeologists before them, they hoped to uncover fragments of the ancient city. Broken pottery, stone carvings, perhaps a few inscriptions. No one expected that one ordinary day would reveal one of the most recognizable faces in human history. Imagine standing beside the workers as the morning begins. The air is pleasantly cool before the midday heat arrives. Small brushes sweep away fine sand. Wooden baskets carry loose soil from one corner of the excavation. Every discovery is treated with quiet respect. Archaeology is rarely dramatic. It is built upon patience, hour after hour, stone after stone. Then inside what had once been the workshop of the royal sculptor Thutmose, something extraordinary begins to emerge. At first, only a small portion becomes visible, a graceful curve, then part of a crown. Slowly, careful hands continue removing the surrounding earth. Soon, an elegant face appears. Calm, serene, almost impossibly lifelike. For a moment it must have felt as though someone sleeping peacefully beneath the desert had gently opened her eyes after thousands of years. The famous bust of Nefertiti had returned to the light. Imagine seeing it for the very first time. The tall blue crown rises proudly above her head. Her long neck gives the sculpture remarkable elegance. Her cheeks are softly shaped. Her lips rest in a calm expression that reveals neither joy nor sadness. Her gaze seems distant, thoughtful, almost timeless. One eye contains a carefully crafted quartz inlay. The other remains unfinished, reminding us that even masterpieces sometimes remain incomplete. That missing eye has inspired countless questions. Was the bust simply a sculptor's model? Was the second eye never intended to be added? Did time damage the sculpture? No one can answer with complete certainty. And somehow the mystery only deepens its beauty. The bust itself is not carved entirely from stone. Instead, a limestone core was carefully covered with layers of painted plaster. This allowed the sculptor to create remarkably delicate features. Even today, modern artists continue admiring the extraordinary craftsmanship. Every line appears balanced, every proportion carefully considered. Nothing feels excessive, nothing feels hurried. It is quiet perfection. Picture yourself inside Thutmose's ancient workshop more than 3,000 years ago. Sunlight enters softly through open windows. Apprentices carefully grind colorful pigments. Stone dust floats gently through warm air. Half-finished statues stand against the walls. The master sculptor studies Nefertiti's face with extraordinary concentration. His task is not merely to copy her appearance. He hopes to capture something deeper. Grace, wisdom, presence, perhaps even the quiet confidence that so many ancient reliefs suggest she possessed. As the hours pass, the sculpture slowly comes alive beneath his skilled hands. He cannot possibly imagine that one day millions of people across the world will admire his work. He simply performs his craft with patience and devotion. That quiet dedication becomes his gift to history. When news of the discovery spread across Europe, excitement grew rapidly. Scholars immediately recognized that this was no ordinary artifact. The bust offered something rare. Most ancient Egyptian royal portraits appear formal and symbolic. This face felt different. It seemed almost familiar. Many people described it as surprisingly modern. They saw intelligence rather than distance, calm rather than power, humanity rather than perfection. Soon Nefertiti became one of the most recognizable women from the ancient world. Books featured her image. Museums celebrated her elegance. Artists painted new interpretations. Filmmakers imagined her life. Her face quietly crossed the boundaries of history and entered popular culture. Yet behind that famous face, the mystery remained unchanged. The bust revealed extraordinary beauty. It revealed remarkable artistic skill. But it revealed almost nothing about what truly happened to the queen herself. Imagine standing quietly before the sculpture today. Visitors move softly through the museum gallery. Some pause only for a few seconds. Others remain much longer. The room itself is peaceful. No voices from ancient Egypt can be heard. Only silent observation. You study her expression. She does not smile. She does not frown. She simply looks forward with remarkable calm. Perhaps that is why the sculpture continues to captivate us. It never tells us exactly what to think. Each visitor sees something slightly different. Some notice strength. Others notice kindness. Some see confidence. Others see quiet sadness. The sculpture offers no answers, only possibilities. Perhaps that is the greatest achievement of its unknown creator. More than 3,000 years after it was made, people continue asking the same questions. Who was she? What kind of queen did she become? What hopes filled her heart? What fears remained hidden behind royal ceremony? History answers only a few. The rest belongs to imagination. As evening slowly settles over Egypt once again, the ruins of Amarna grow peaceful beneath the fading light. The city itself has long since disappeared. Its palaces have fallen. Its temples have crumbled. Its streets have returned to silence. Yet one face survived. One portrait crossed the centuries almost untouched. One quiet expression became stronger than time itself. The desert did not preserve an empire. It preserved a memory. And sometimes a single human face can outlive even the greatest kingdoms. Still, one final mystery remains. Beyond the sculpture, beyond the lost city, beyond the missing tomb, who was the real Nefertiti? Not the queen carved in stone, not the legend remembered through history, but the woman herself. That final journey now awaits us. separating the real Nefertiti from 3,000 years of myth and mystery. The night has settled gently over Egypt. The desert, which only hours ago shimmered beneath the brilliant sun, now rests beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The warm air has grown cooler, and the silence feels almost timeless. Somewhere beyond the distant hills, the Nile continues its quiet journey toward the sea, just as it has for thousands of years. Imagine yourself sitting beside that ancient river. There is no hurry. Only the soft sound of flowing water, the distant call of a night bird, the gentle breeze moving through reeds along the riverbank. It is the perfect place to think about the people who came before us, about how memory changes with time, about how history slowly becomes legend. And few people illustrate that transformation more beautifully than Nefertiti. During her own lifetime, she was a queen, a wife, a mother, a religious partner to one of Egypt's most unusual pharaohs. She walked through palace gardens, she attended ceremonies, she watched her daughters grow. She lived each day as every human being does, without knowing how future generations would remember her. But history rarely leaves people unchanged. As centuries passed, the real woman slowly disappeared behind stories, speculation, and imagination. The farther we move from the past, the more easily mystery fills the empty spaces left by missing evidence. Imagine a beautiful painting exposed to centuries of wind and rain. Little by little, small details fade away. A corner disappears. Colors soften. Cracks appear across the surface. Eventually, viewers begin guessing what was once there. Some guesses prove correct, others do not. The same thing has happened with Nefertiti. Every missing inscription has encouraged new theories. Every damaged monument has invited fresh interpretation. Some ideas rest upon careful archaeological evidence. Others belong more to imagination than to history. One of the most common myths is that Nefertiti ruled Egypt alone for many years after Akhenaten's death. It is certainly possible that she briefly held extraordinary authority. Some inscriptions support that possibility, but no surviving evidence allows historians to describe a long, independent reign with complete confidence. Another popular story claims that Nefertiti was the mother of Tutankhamun. This idea appears frequently in books and documentaries. Yet modern research suggests the answer is far more complicated. Genetic studies indicate that Tutankhamun's mother was likely one of Akhenaten's sisters, although the exact identity remains uncertain. If that conclusion is correct, Nefertiti would have been Tutankhamun's stepmother rather than his biological mother. Even today, scholars continue examining new evidence with great care. History is rarely as simple as legend. Sometimes the most honest answer is simply, we do not know. That may sound disappointing. Yet in truth, uncertainty is one of archaeology's greatest strengths. Good historians resist the temptation to invent certainty where none exists. Instead, they patiently follow evidence wherever it leads. Imagine an archaeologist carefully brushing sand away from an ancient inscription. Every grain removed reveals another tiny clue. But no careful scholar would paint missing words simply because they wished the story to feel complete. The empty spaces matter too. They remind us to remain humble before the past. Nefertiti teaches exactly that lesson. She reminds us that history is not a finished book. It is an ongoing conversation between evidence and curiosity. As new discoveries emerge, old ideas sometimes change. A single fragment of carved stone, a newly translated inscription, a forgotten seal buried beneath collapsed walls. Any one of these could reshape what we believe. That possibility keeps historians returning to ancient Egypt generation after generation. Imagine once more the bustling city of Akhenaten during its brightest days. The streets are filled with merchants. Children laugh beneath shaded courtyards. Artisans carefully carve limestone. Priests raise their hands toward the warm rays of Aten. And through the center of the city walks Nefertiti, not as a legend, not as a museum masterpiece, simply as a woman living in her own time. Perhaps she pauses to speak with one of her daughters. Perhaps she quietly watches craftsmen building another monument. Perhaps she stands beside Akhenaten during an evening ceremony while the setting sun paints the cliffs with shades of gold and crimson. These ordinary moments almost never survive in historical records, yet they were almost certainly the moments that filled most of her life. History remembers crowns. Life remembers conversations. History preserves monuments. Life is made from ordinary mornings and peaceful evenings. That simple truth brings Nefertiti closer to us. Although separated by more than 3 millennia, she experienced many of the same emotions that shape every human life. Hope, uncertainty, joy, responsibility, love for family, concern for the future. Those feelings require no translation. They belong equally to every century. As the stars brighten above the desert, it becomes easier to understand why Nefertiti continues to fascinate the modern world. It is not only because she was beautiful, nor only because her famous bust survived. It is because she reminds us that even the most powerful people eventually become mysteries. Empires disappear. Cities crumble. Names fade. Yet one thoughtful face carved in limestone can continue speaking across thousands of years. Perhaps that is the quiet miracle of history. It does not allow us to possess the past completely. Instead, it invites us to keep asking gentle questions, to remain curious, to accept that some mysteries may never be fully solved. And perhaps that is exactly as it should be. Because some stories become more meaningful not when every answer is found, but when they continue, inspiring wonder. As dawn slowly approaches beyond the eastern horizon, another chapter of our journey begins to unfold. Only one final step remains. It is time to leave behind the questions that history cannot answer, and reflect upon the extraordinary legacy that Nefertiti left to the world. A legacy that has quietly endured long after kingdoms vanished into the desert sands. The enduring mystery of a queen who refused to be forgotten. The first light of dawn arrived quietly once again. As the eastern horizon slowly brightened, the desert awakened in its own gentle way. A cool breeze drifted across the limestone cliffs. Small birds began their morning songs beside the Nile. The river reflected the soft colors of the rising sun, just as it had every morning for thousands of years. Imagine standing there for a moment. The world feels calm, timeless. It is easy to understand why the ancient Egyptians believed that every sunrise was a promise that life would continue. And perhaps that quiet promise is the perfect place to reflect upon Nefertiti's remarkable story. By now we have traveled through the rise of her extraordinary life. We have watched her stand beside Akhenaten as Egypt embraced a bold religious vision, unlike anything that had come before. We walked through the streets of Akhenaten while the city still shimmered beneath the brilliant Egyptian sun. We searched the silent desert for a tomb that has never been found. We admired the elegant bust that allowed one face to survive when almost everything else disappeared. Yet despite all these discoveries, one simple truth remains. We still know surprisingly little about the woman herself. Imagine opening an ancient book whose first pages have been torn away. The middle chapters remain faded. The final pages are missing entirely. You can still understand parts of the story. You can recognize its importance. But countless details have vanished forever. That is how historians experience Nefertiti. Her life survives in fragments, a beautifully carved relief, a royal seal, a damaged inscription, a painted sculpture. Together they create the outline of a remarkable woman. Yet the finer details remain hidden beneath the passing centuries. This uncertainty has inspired generations of writers, of filmmakers, historians, and artists. Some have imagined Nefertiti as a fearless ruler who governed Egypt alone. Others have portrayed her as a devoted queen, standing faithfully beside her husband. Some describe her as a visionary. Others see a cautious diplomat trying to preserve stability during extraordinary times. The truth may contain elements of all these portraits. Or perhaps none of them completely captures the real person. History rarely gives us perfect certainty. And perhaps that is one reason why Nefertiti continues to inspire such lasting fascination. Every generation asks new questions. Every generation looks at the same ancient evidence through different eyes. Archaeologists search for physical clues. Historians compare inscriptions. Artists seek emotional truth. Together, they continue a conversation that has lasted for centuries. Imagine walking quietly through the ruins of Amarna one final time. The city is silent now. Only broken columns remain where magnificent temples once stood. Fragments of painted plaster lie scattered beneath the sand. Here and there, the foundations of ordinary homes remind us that this was once a living community. Children played here. Families prepared evening meals. Craftsmen shaped stone with patient hands. Messengers hurried through these streets carrying news from distant lands. Life once filled every corner. Today, the wind carries only echoes. Yet those echoes still matter. Every archaeological discovery made at Amarna has helped historians better understand one of Egypt's most unusual chapters. The city may have existed for only a relatively short period, but its influence reached far beyond its lifetime. Its artistic style changed Egyptian art forever. Its religious experiment challenged centuries of tradition. Its royal family left behind questions that scholars continue to explore even today. And at the center of that remarkable story stands Nefertiti, not simply because she was beautiful, not only because her famous bust survived, but because she became a symbol of an age that dared to imagine something different. Perhaps that is why her story still feels surprisingly modern. She lived during a period of dramatic change. Old beliefs were questioned. New ideas emerged. Political uncertainty shaped everyday life. People struggled to adapt while preserving what mattered most to them. Although separated from us by more than 3,000 years, these experiences remain deeply human. Every generation faces moments of uncertainty. Every society experiences change. Every family hopes to find stability while the world around it evolves. In that sense, Nefertiti belongs not only to ancient Egypt, she belongs to the wider story of humanity. Imagine the famous sculptor Thutmose, looking once more at the portrait he created. Perhaps he quietly steps back from his work. The soft morning light enters his workshop. The painted bust stands before him with extraordinary calm. He cannot know that thousands of years later, people from every continent will admire his creation. He cannot know that entire books will be written about the woman whose likeness he captured. He simply completes another day's work. Sometimes history grows from the quietest acts. A sculptor shaping limestone, a queen attending a ceremony, a scribe recording a royal decree. None of them could imagine that their ordinary responsibilities would become treasures for distant generations. As the day slowly fades into evening, the Nile once again reflects the golden colors of sunset. Palm trees sway gently in the warm breeze. The desert grows peaceful. Stars begin appearing one by one above the ancient land. The same stars watched Nefertiti during her lifetime. The same stars shine above Egypt today. Empires have risen and fallen beneath their light. Languages have changed. Religions have transformed. Entire civilizations have come and gone, yet the quiet beauty of the Egyptian night remains. Perhaps somewhere beneath those silent sands, hidden from every map and every excavation, lies one final answer waiting patiently to be discovered. Or perhaps the greatest mystery is not where Nefertiti rests. Perhaps it is how one woman, whose life remains only partially understood, could continue inspiring wonder after more than 3,000 years. Some mysteries invite us to search for answers. Others gently remind us that history will always keep a few secrets of its own. And perhaps that quiet mystery is part of what makes Nefertiti unforgettable. The last clues left behind by Egypt's most enigmatic queen. The night slowly gave way to another peaceful morning. Across the broad waters of the Nile, the first rays of sunlight stretched gently towards the western desert. The ancient cliffs glowed with soft shades of gold, while the cool breeze carried the scent of fresh river water through fields that had sustained Egypt for countless generations. Imagine yourself standing quietly upon a small hill overlooking the valley. There is no sound except the gentle rustling of reeds and the distant call of birds beginning another day. It is easy to believe that time itself has slowed. Places like this encourage reflection. They remind us that history is not only a collection of dates and monuments. It is also a story about memory, about what survives, what disappears, and what continues to inspire long after the people themselves are gone. By now we have followed Nefertiti through nearly every stage of her remarkable journey. We have watched her rise beside Akhenaten during one of Egypt's most extraordinary periods. We walked through the bright streets of Akhetaten while its temples welcomed the warm rays of Aten. We searched the desert for a tomb that has never been found. We admired the famous portrait that transformed an ancient queen into a timeless symbol of elegance. Yet even after all this, we are left with the same quiet realization. History has preserved her face far more clearly than her voice. Imagine if for only a single afternoon we could sit beside Nefertiti in one of the shaded gardens of the royal palace. No ceremonies, no officials, no priests, only two people watching the gentle movement of the Nile. What questions would we ask? Would we ask about her childhood, about her family? Would we ask whether she truly believed in Aten with all her heart? Would we ask what she thought as Egypt slowly changed around her? Or perhaps we would ask the simplest question of all. Were you happy? Unfortunately, history cannot answer. Ancient inscriptions were created to honor kings, celebrate victories, and preserve royal achievements. They rarely recorded private conversations. They almost never revealed personal doubts. As a result, the most human parts of Nefertiti's life remain hidden beyond our reach. Perhaps she sometimes stood alone beneath the evening sky, watching the sun disappear beyond the western horizon. Perhaps she wondered whether the dramatic changes taking place across Egypt would endure. Perhaps she worried about her daughters and the uncertain future awaiting them. These are not unreasonable thoughts. They are the kinds of quiet reflections shared by parents in every age. The more we study history, the more we discover that the people of the ancient world were not so different from ourselves. They loved, they hoped, they feared illness, they celebrated births, they mourned those they lost. They dreamed about tomorrow without knowing what tomorrow would bring. Nefertiti was no exception. One of the greatest lessons her story teaches us is the importance of humility when studying the past. Modern archaeology has achieved remarkable things. Satellite imaging reveals buried cities. DNA analysis helps identify ancient royal families. Ground-penetrating radar allows researchers to examine hidden structures without disturbing them. Sophisticated laboratories preserve fragile artifacts that once seemed impossible to save. And yet, despite all these extraordinary tools, some questions remain unanswered. That is not a failure. It is a reminder that history is larger than any one generation. Every archaeologist builds upon the work of those who came before. Every discovery creates new questions for those who follow. Imagine a young archaeology student visiting Egypt for the very first time, standing before the ruins of Amarna. They feel the warm desert wind across their face. They look at the broken foundations of palaces where Nefertiti once walked. They understand that somewhere beneath the surrounding landscape, countless stories still remain hidden. Perhaps one day, that student, or someone like them, will uncover the evidence that finally explains Nefertiti's last years. History often rewards patience. The greatest discoveries sometimes arrive when they are least expected. Until then, the mystery continues. Perhaps that mystery itself has become part of Nefertiti's legacy. After all, many rulers are remembered only for battles or monuments. Nefertiti is remembered for something more unusual. She reminds us that unanswered questions can be just as powerful as certainty. Her story encourages curiosity rather than conclusion. It invites careful thought rather than easy answers. That may be why she continues to captivate people across every generation. As evening returns once more to the Nile Valley, the colors of the sky slowly soften. Golden light becomes amber. Amber becomes deep blue. The first stars quietly appear above the silent desert. Somewhere beneath those same stars, hidden among ancient valleys and forgotten chambers, the final pieces of Nefertiti's story may still wait patiently beneath the sand. Whether they are ever found remains unknown. But perhaps that is perfectly fitting. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist to remind us how much wonder still remains in the world. And among all the mysteries left behind by ancient Egypt, few are as graceful, as enduring, or as quietly captivating as the mystery of Queen Nefertiti. Soon, our journey will reach its final destination. One last chapter remains, a peaceful reflection on the remarkable legacy of a queen whose face survived the centuries, whose story continues to inspire millions, and whose name still echoes across the sands of Egypt after more than 3,000 years. What we truly know about Egypt's most mysterious queen. The sky above Egypt slowly brightened once again. Long before the heat of the day settled across the desert, the Nile reflected soft shades of silver and gold. Morning birds crossed the quiet water, while fishermen gently pushed their boats away from the riverbank. Palm leaves swayed almost silently in the cool breeze, and for a few peaceful moments the world seemed exactly as it must have appeared thousands of years ago. Imagine standing beside that ancient river. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen only to the gentle movement of water. Feel the warmth of the first sunlight touching your face. There is nothing demanding your attention. Only the quiet presence of history. As our journey through the life of Nefertiti approaches its final chapter, perhaps this is the perfect time to pause and ask one simple question. After more than 3,000 years of searching, excavating, studying, and debating, what do we actually know? History often feels like a puzzle. Some pieces remain perfectly preserved. Others have disappeared forever. The challenge is learning which parts belong to certainty and which belong to imagination. When it comes to Nefertiti, the difference matters. It is tempting to fill every empty space with dramatic stories, to imagine secret romances, hidden conspiracies, lost treasures, forgotten kingdoms. Yet the real story is remarkable enough without adding anything that history cannot support. We know that Nefertiti lived during Egypt's 18th dynasty. We know that she became the great royal wife of Akhenaten. We know that together they stood at the center of one of the most extraordinary religious transformations in ancient Egyptian history. Their names appeared together on monuments, temple walls, ceremonial objects, and official inscriptions. These are not legends. They are pieces of evidence carefully preserved across the centuries. We also know that she held an unusually prominent public role. Again and again, artists portrayed her beside the king. She participated in religious ceremonies. She offered gifts to Aten. She appeared beneath the outstretched rays of the sun almost as frequently as Akhenaten himself. This level of visibility was highly unusual for an Egyptian queen. It tells us that she occupied a position of remarkable importance within the royal court. We know that she and Akhenaten had 6 daughters whose names survive in ancient records. We see them together in family scenes, unlike almost anything produced during earlier Egyptian history. The royal household appears affectionate, natural, almost intimate. Whether these scenes reflected everyday life or royal symbolism, or perhaps both, they reveal a fascinating change in Egyptian art, and then the evidence begins to fade. It is one of history's quietest disappearances. Nefertiti's name becomes increasingly difficult to follow. Some inscriptions mention figures whose identities remain uncertain. Some monuments were altered by later rulers. Others were deliberately destroyed. Time itself completed what politics had begun. Imagine walking through Amarna during the years after Akhenaten's death. The city still stands. The temples remain open. Yet something feels different. Officials whisper more carefully. Workers continue their daily tasks, but uncertainty lingers beneath the surface. Gradually, attention shifts away from Aten. The old gods quietly return. Families who had once embraced the new capital begin preparing to leave. Little by little, the great experiment reaches its end. Perhaps Nefertiti witnessed these final days. Perhaps she did not. History cannot say. One possibility is that she died before Akhenaten. Another suggests she ruled briefly under another royal name. A third proposes that political events removed her from public life. Each theory rests upon fragments of evidence. None has yet convinced every scholar, and perhaps none ever will. There is a certain beauty in that uncertainty, not because unanswered questions are satisfying, but because they remind us that the past still has the power to surprise us. Every archaeological discovery begins with curiosity. Someone notices an unusual stone, a buried doorway, a forgotten inscription. No one can predict which discovery will change history next. Some of Egypt's greatest treasures remained hidden for thousands of years before finally returning to the light. Perhaps somewhere beneath untouched desert sand, another clue still waits. A seal bearing her name, a painted coffin, a chamber whose doorway has never been opened. Or perhaps the final answer disappeared long ago, carried away by time itself. If that is true, we must accept that not every mystery receives a perfect conclusion. The ancient Egyptians themselves understood that memory was precious. They believed a person's name allowed part of their existence to continue. As long as someone remembered your name, part of you remained alive. If they could see the modern world today, they might find comfort in knowing that Nefertiti's name has endured beyond anything they could have imagined. School children learn about her. Artists continue drawing inspiration from her famous portrait. Historians devote entire careers to understanding her world. Millions of visitors quietly stand before her bust, each year studying the calm expression created by an artist more than 3 millennia ago. Very few human beings leave such a lasting impression upon history. As the afternoon slowly fades into evening, the Nile once again becomes peaceful. Golden reflections dance across the water. The warm breeze carries the scent of flowering plants growing along the riverbanks. Somewhere beyond the western horizon, the sun begins another gentle descent. The same sun that Nefertiti once watched from palace balconies. The same sun whose rays inspired one of history's most remarkable religious revolutions. The same sun that still rises every morning over Egypt. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, stone crumbles, empires disappear, yet nature continues its quiet rhythm. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Human lives are brief, but the stories they leave behind can travel across thousands of years, inspiring people they could never have imagined. Nefertiti's story is one of those rare gifts. It reminds us that history is not simply about discovering answers. It is about learning to appreciate wonder, to remain curious, to respect evidence, and to accept that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that remain just slightly out of reach. The journey is almost complete now. Only one final evening remains before we leave the ancient world behind. One last peaceful reflection awaits us. A farewell to the queen whose beauty became timeless, whose mystery became immortal, and whose quiet legacy continues to shine like the rising sun over the eternal Nile. The last echoes before the end. The evening settled gently over the Nile. The final light of the day stretched across the water, turning its quiet surface into flowing ribbons of gold. Palm trees stood motionless in the warm breeze, while the distant desert slowly exchanged the bright colors of afternoon for the deep blue of approaching night. Imagine yourself sitting beside the river one last time. There is no destination left to reach, no palace waiting beyond the horizon, no forgotten temple hidden among the cliffs. Only the peaceful rhythm of the Nile, flowing exactly as it did during the lifetime of Nefertiti, more than 3,000 years ago. Rivers have a remarkable way of reminding us how brief a human life truly is. Generation after generation has stood upon these same banks. Children became parents. Kings became memories. Cities flourished before quietly disappearing beneath drifting sands, yet the river remained. It carried the boats of farmers. It reflected the crowns of pharaohs It witnessed celebrations, funerals, victories, and heartbreaks without ever changing its course. Somewhere along these waters, Nefertiti herself almost certainly paused many times during her life. Perhaps she watched the sun rise while preparing for another royal ceremony. Perhaps she stood quietly upon a palace terrace at sunset, listening only to the gentle sound of flowing water. Perhaps she simply enjoyed a rare moment of silence away from the responsibilities of the royal court. History rarely records such ordinary moments, yet they often become the most meaningful. Throughout our journey, we have followed the remarkable path of a woman whose story continues to inspire millions. We watched her rise from uncertain beginnings into the heart of Egypt's royal family. We stood beside her as she supported one of history's boldest religious transformations. We walked through the bright streets of Akhenaten while the city still echoed with hope and ambition. We searched patiently for a tomb that may still lie hidden beneath the desert. We admired a portrait whose calm beauty has survived the passing of more than 30 centuries. And with every step, one truth became increasingly clear. Nefertiti's greatest legacy is not simply her beauty. Beauty alone rarely survives the passage of time. Many beautiful faces have been forgotten. Many powerful rulers have vanished completely from memory. What allowed Nefertiti to endure was something deeper. She lived at the center of a moment when an entire civilization dared to redefine itself. She became a symbol of courage during uncertainty, of elegance during transformation, of quiet strength while history itself seemed to shift beneath her feet. Imagine returning once more to the city of Akhenaten at its height. Morning sunlight fills wide temple courtyards. Priests lift offerings toward Aten. Children laugh within palace gardens. Artists carefully paint fresh plaster upon elegant walls. Foreign messengers arrive carrying letters from distant kingdoms. Everywhere there is movement, purpose, hope. The people living there could never imagine that their magnificent city would one day disappear. To them, this world must have felt permanent. But permanence is one of history's greatest illusions. Every civilization believes its own time will last forever. The Egyptians were no different. Yet even as Akhenaten flourished, time continued its quiet work. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Wind slowly erased streets, stone collapsed, sand covered doorways. Eventually the city disappeared so completely that only scattered ruins hinted at its existence. Still, something remarkable survived. Not the palace, not the temples, not even the royal tomb, a single face, a carefully crafted portrait. An expression so calm that it continues speaking across thousands of years. Perhaps that is history's quietest miracle. Sometimes one human face preserves an entire civilization more effectively than the grandest monument. Imagine standing before Nefertiti's famous bust for the very last time. The museum around you grows quiet. Visitors speak softly. Some pause only briefly before moving onward. Others remain still, almost as though expecting the sculpture to reveal one final secret. You study the graceful lines of her face, the elegant blue crown, the calm eyes, the gentle curve of her lips. There is confidence there, but also mystery. No matter how long you look, the sculpture never fully explains itself. It simply invites another question, another thought, another quiet moment of wonder. Perhaps that is exactly why it has become timeless. The greatest works of art do not answer every question. They encourage us to keep asking. As darkness slowly settles across ancient Egypt once again, the stars begin appearing above the endless desert. The same constellations watched Nefertiti during her lifetime. The same moonlight once illuminated the walls of Akhenaten. The same gentle breeze moved across the royal gardens where she walked with her family. Time has changed almost everything else, but the sky remains wonderfully familiar. Imagine looking upward beside her. For one brief moment, separated by more than 3,000 years, both you and Nefertiti gaze upon the very same stars. It is a quiet reminder that history is never entirely distant. The people of the ancient world were not strangers. They loved their families. They dreamed about tomorrow. They worried about the future. They searched for meaning beneath the same heavens that stretch above us today. Perhaps that shared humanity is Nefertiti's greatest gift to us. She reminds us that history is not built only from monuments and royal titles. It is built from ordinary lives lived with hope, uncertainty, courage, and faith. The mystery surrounding her may never be completely solved. Her tomb may remain hidden forever. New discoveries may continue reshaping what we believe. Or perhaps one quiet morning, somewhere beneath the Egyptian desert, archaeologists will uncover the final missing piece. Until then, the mystery itself continues to inspire. It encourages patience, curiosity, humility, and wonder. As the Nile flows peacefully beneath the starlit sky, our journey through Nefertiti's remarkable world is almost complete. Only one final chapter remains. One last peaceful farewell to the queen whose story refused to disappear, whose face conquered time itself, and whose name continues to echo across history long after the empire she helped shape became part of the silent desert. The legacy, hidden within the sands of time. The dawn arrived quietly, just as it always had. Long before the first voices echoed along the banks of the Nile, the desert was already awake. A gentle wind swept across the limestone cliffs, carrying with it grains of sand that had traveled over ancient ruins for countless generations. The eastern sky slowly transformed from deep violet into soft shades of gold, and once again the sun rose over Egypt. Imagine standing there in complete silence. No crowds, no museums, no archaeologists. Only the endless desert stretching toward the horizon. The same desert that once witnessed the footsteps of kings, queens, priests, builders, farmers, and children who believed their world would last forever. Among them walked Nefertiti. Not yet a legend, not yet the subject of books and documentaries. Simply a woman living in an extraordinary moment of history. Perhaps that is the greatest challenge we face today. It is easy to admire her as an icon. It is far more difficult to remember that she was also a human being. She experienced ordinary mornings. She watched seasons change along the Nile. She celebrated joyful moments with her family. She almost certainly faced uncertainty, disappointment, and loss. History often preserves achievements while quietly erasing emotions. Yet emotions are what truly shape a life. Imagine the royal palace during one peaceful evening. The day's ceremonies have ended. The sun has disappeared behind the western hills. Servants quietly light oil lamps that cast warm reflections across polished stone floors. The sounds of the palace grow softer with every passing moment. Somewhere within those quiet rooms, Nefertiti may simply be sitting beside her daughters, listening to their voices after another long day. No official inscription would ever record such a scene. No monument would celebrate it. And yet, moments like these may have meant far more to her than any royal ceremony. This is one of history's quiet lessons. The greatest moments in a person's life are not always the ones remembered by the world. Sometimes they are the smallest. A conversation, a smile, a shared meal, a peaceful sunset beside the people we love. As centuries passed, those deeply personal moments disappeared forever. What remained were fragments, broken statues, damaged reliefs, pieces of painted plaster, scattered inscriptions. Each discovery became another small window into a world that no longer existed. Archaeologists learned to listen carefully, not only to what the evidence revealed, but also to what it could not reveal. Silence itself became part of the story. The silence surrounding Nefertiti is unlike almost any other in Egyptian history. Most great rulers leave behind long records, victories, campaigns, building projects, royal decrees. Nefertiti leaves something different. She leaves questions. And strangely enough, those unanswered questions have allowed her story to remain alive for generation after generation. Imagine if historians knew everything about her, every detail of her childhood, every year of her reign, the exact location of her tomb, the complete story of her final days. Her life would certainly remain important, but perhaps some of its quiet magic would disappear. Mystery has a unique power. It invites curiosity. It encourages patience. It reminds us that the past still has secrets waiting beneath the sand. That is why new archaeological expeditions continue every year. Researchers carefully examine satellite images. Ground-penetrating radar explores hidden spaces beneath ancient monuments. Advanced scanning technology reveals details invisible to earlier generations. Every improvement brings fresh hope, not because archaeologists expect immediate answers, but because history has surprised us before. Few people expected Tutankhamun's nearly untouched tomb to survive into the 20th century. Yet there it was, waiting patiently, beneath layers of stone and sand. Perhaps somewhere nearby, another remarkable discovery still rests undisturbed. If such a discovery is ever made, it will not simply belong to scholars. It will belong to everyone who has ever wondered about the ancient world. Imagine the moment when a sealed doorway is uncovered. Dust is carefully brushed aside. Ancient plaster still covers the entrance. No footsteps have crossed that threshold for more than 3,000 years. The silence is overwhelming. The archaeologists pause, not out of uncertainty, but out of respect. They understand that they stand at the edge of another conversation with history. Whether that doorway belongs to Nefertiti or to someone else hardly matters at first. What matters is the reminder that the past still speaks. It simply speaks very softly. As our journey continues, one final realization begins to emerge. Perhaps Nefertiti's greatest achievement was not political, nor artistic, nor even religious. Perhaps it was something far quieter. She became a bridge connecting the modern world with one of humanity's oldest civilizations. Millions of people who know almost nothing about ancient Egypt still recognize her face. Children learn her name in school. Artists continue drawing inspiration from her elegance. Historians dedicate entire careers to understanding the world she inhabited. Very few individuals from the ancient world continue inspiring such universal curiosity. That enduring fascination is itself a remarkable legacy. As evening slowly returns for one final time before our farewell, the Nile becomes calm once more. Golden light dances across its surface. The warm breeze carries the scent of fertile earth from nearby fields. The desert beyond grows peaceful beneath a sky that slowly welcomes the first stars. Nothing seems hurried. Nothing feels unfinished. Only the quiet rhythm of nature continues. The river flows. The wind moves. The stars appear. Exactly as they did during Nefertiti's lifetime, exactly as they do today. Perhaps that continuity offers its own gentle comfort. Empires may disappear. Cities may crumble. Names may fade. But the beauty of the natural world quietly remains, reminding us that every generation becomes part of a story much larger than itself. And somewhere within that endless story, the memory of one remarkable queen continues to shine. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because some mysteries continue inviting us to wonder. Our journey now approaches its final destination. Only one last peaceful chapter remains. A farewell to Nefertiti, whose life became history, whose history became legend, and whose legend continues to inspire the world after more than 3,000 years, saying goodbye to history's most mysterious queen. The final sunrise arrived with quiet grace. Far beyond the eastern horizon, the first light slowly awakened the land of Egypt. The golden rays touched the calm waters of the Nile before climbing gently across fertile fields, ancient temples, and silent desert cliffs. For thousands of years, this same sunrise had greeted countless generations, asking nothing of them except to begin another day. Imagine yourself standing upon the banks of the Nile one final time. The air is cool. The world is still. The river moves with patient confidence toward the distant sea. There is nowhere left to travel. No hidden tomb waiting beyond the next hill. No forgotten inscription waiting to answer every remaining question. Only the quiet beauty of Egypt itself. Throughout this journey, we have followed the footsteps of a queen whose life continues to fascinate the modern world. We watched a young woman rise beside one of Egypt's most extraordinary pharaohs. We witnessed the birth of a new religious vision centered upon the light of Aten. We walked through the broad streets of Akhenaten while the city shimmered beneath the desert sun. We searched patiently for a royal tomb that has never been found. We admired a portrait so graceful that it conquered the passage of time itself. Yet perhaps the greatest discovery was not hidden beneath the sand. Perhaps it was hidden within the story itself. History often teaches us that greatness is measured through conquest, through wealth, through enormous monuments built to outlast centuries. But Nefertiti reminds us of something gentler. Sometimes greatness survives because it inspires curiosity, because it encourages people separated by thousands of years to continue asking thoughtful questions. Imagine Nefertiti standing upon the balcony of her palace as the sun rises above Akhenaten. The city is waking. Craftsmen prepare for another day's work. Children laugh in quiet courtyards. Boats begin moving across the Nile. Priests lift their hands toward the warmth of the morning light. For her, this is simply another ordinary day. She cannot possibly imagine that more than 30 centuries later, people from every corner of the world will still speak her name. She cannot know that artists will study her portrait, that historians will debate her life, that archaeologists will search patiently for the place where she was finally laid to rest. Like every human being, she lives only within her own present. The future remains invisible. Perhaps that thought is strangely comforting. None of us truly knows how we will be remembered. We simply live one day at a time. We care for those we love. We make choices according to what we believe. We leave behind small traces of ourselves in the lives of others. The rest belongs to time. Time has not been equally kind to everyone from ancient Egypt. Many pharaohs are known only by damaged names carved upon broken stones. Entire dynasties have faded into obscurity. Cities once filled with music and celebration now sleep beneath the desert. Yet Nefertiti remains, not because every detail of her life survived, but because enough remained to remind us of the extraordinary human story behind the legend. Her famous bust continues to inspire admiration, but it is only one small part of her legacy. Her true legacy lies in the questions she left behind. Questions about leadership, faith, family, change, memory, and the fragile nature of even the greatest civilizations. Imagine walking once more through the ruins of Amarna as evening approaches. The streets are empty now. The temples have long since fallen. Only scattered stones remain where magnificent buildings once welcomed ambassadors from distant kingdoms. The wind moves gently between broken walls. The silence feels peaceful rather than lonely. Nature has slowly reclaimed what humanity once believed would last forever. And yet, even here, history has not disappeared. Every stone carries a memory. Every fragment whispers a story. The city may have vanished, but its influence continues through the discoveries made by patient archaeologists and careful historians. Perhaps that is one of history's greatest lessons. Nothing truly disappears while someone continues to remember. The ancient Egyptians believed that speaking a person's name allowed part of their spirit to continue living. If they were right, then Nefertiti has received one of the greatest gifts imaginable. Her name is spoken across the world, in classrooms, museums, libraries, documentaries, quiet conversations between travelers exploring Egypt for the first time. Each time her story is told, another thread connects the present to the distant past. As the afternoon slowly becomes evening, the sunlight softens across the Nile Valley. Golden reflections dance upon the water. A flock of birds crosses the western sky before disappearing towards the marshes. Palm trees sway gently in the warm breeze. The desert prepares once more for another peaceful night. Imagine sitting beside the river until the final light disappears. There is no need to hurry. History has waited thousands of years. It can wait a little longer. You watch the first stars appear. Perhaps Nefertiti once looked upon these very same constellations. Perhaps she wondered what future generations might become. Perhaps she simply admired the beauty of the quiet night after another demanding day. We will never know. And perhaps we do not need to know. Some mysteries deserve respect rather than certainty. Some stories become more meaningful precisely because they remain unfinished. Nefertiti's life is one of those stories. She reminds us that archaeology, is not only about discovering treasures, it is about understanding people, real people, people who laughed, hoped, worried, celebrated, mourned, and dreamed beneath the same sky that stretches above us today. As our journey comes to its peaceful conclusion, one final image remains. The Nile continues flowing exactly as it did during the reign of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The desert wind continues shaping the dunes. The sun continues rising every morning without fail. The stars continue shining above the Valley of the Kings. Nature remembers in its own quiet way. And somewhere, whether hidden beneath untouched desert sands or forever lost to history, the final resting place of Nefertiti still keeps its silent secret. Perhaps one day that secret will be revealed. Perhaps it never will. But her greatest legacy no longer depends upon discovering her tomb. It lives within every person who pauses to wonder about the ancient world. Within every child who opens a history book for the first time. Within every traveler who gazes across the Nile at sunrise. Within every archaeologist who patiently brushes away another layer of sand, believing that the past still has stories left to tell. And so, as the last light fades across ancient Egypt, we quietly say goodbye, not only to a queen, but to an age of extraordinary imagination, courage, beauty, and mystery. The city of Akhetaten has vanished, the temples have fallen silent. The empire has become history, yet one graceful face, one unforgettable name, and one timeless story continues shining across more than 3,000 years, like the first golden rays of the Egyptian sun. Thank you for taking this peaceful journey through the life and mystery of Nefertiti, history's most mysterious queen. May her story continue to inspire curiosity, humility, and wonder for generations yet to come.